That's pretty ugly.
Calling the meeting to order. And we do have everyone present, so we do have a quorum. I am assuming and hoping everyone has had a chance to read the minutes. Do we have any discussion about those minutes from the last meeting? Do I have a motion?
Move to
Approved minutes. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Bring it up.
All right. On to the claims. We have one claim today for $5,575. Cam, can you give us a breakdown of what that claim is?
Yeah, that's my work as a contractor of the Redevelopment Commission. There's two sides of that, of course. We have a standard engagement that's a flat fee for the year, and another engagement that's project-specific relative to the Trades District and Shadeland Avenue. So I think there's the flat fee amount, and there's some time in there from the other project-related matter, totaling the total amount of the one claim there.
Questions, comments, concerns for Cam? I have a motion to approve the vouchers.
So moved.
Second?
There you go.
Favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Right. Staff report, Cam, we got a good list here today, so
Right. That's right. Thank you.
go ahead with that.
Fortunately for everyone, my throat kind of hurts, so I'm gonna try to speak less than normal. But feel free to ask any questions that you might have. We also have a presentation as part of our new business pursuant to a new statutory requirement from the legislature that we present about TIF to overlapping taxing units, which we'll get to later. First, I want to start with some good news. If you'll recall, the Redevelopment Commission closed out an EPA community-wide assessment grant at the end of, or sort of late fall last year, that we put to some really good use. Money from that grant went into the Mission Mechanical project, which it's a little out of the way, and maybe I've said this before, but it bears mentioning again. The former Permanent Magnet property is on Bragdon Street, north of Pendleton Pike, behind some other buildings, so you kind of have to find it on purpose, but please do so. It's a fantastic project that I think this Redevelopment Commission should feel very proud of. We leveraged our grant resources to accomplish environmental due diligence and some phase 2 investigation in that area to make sure that it was safe for their reuse. They've really done a phenomenal job cleaning up that property, changing the layout of kind of how the parking and ingress egress works, reskinned the building. It looks great. They have 120 plus employees. The median wage is $70,000 to $72,000. I mean, this is an impactful project. And it's too bad that it's hidden because it looks great. So went into that one. We put EPA grant money into Meyer Plastics property, of course, a brownfield site, and got some good use out of it there, and a number of other assessments. So well used, and so we applied again, and I'm glad to tell you that we were selected to receive another EPA community-wide assessment grant for fiscal year 2019. For the next 3 years, it'll be $300,000. Again, there's not a local match. This is pure, is 100% grant-funded environmental assessments that we can perform to benefit private land transactions, our own. We use the money to assess and get a comfort letter on the police station site as well. So just examples of things that we've been able to do. It's a great tool, and we're glad to get a new grant. So we're now in the process that's been announced. We've been notified that we'll be awarded the grant. There's a few months here where we'll do some sort of pre-award steps with EPA. Again, this is part of my background as redevelopment director for City of Indianapolis, we administered a number of EPA grants, so I'm familiar with the process and will be able to shepherd us to a cooperative agreement with EPA that we'll probably execute in September. It's usually September sometime, at which point the funds will be available for our use. So, good news there. Any questions about that?
Is it 3,000 or 300,000 total or 300,000 each year?
300,000 total. And there's not a breakdown per year. We could spend it all right away if we had it. We just have 3 years to spend it all. Bruce.
I was by the Mission Mechanical place over the weekend. It is first class.
Yeah, it looks
really
good.
nice.
I'm glad you've seen it.
Talking about dressing up a neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. To others who have not been by that, I would encourage you to do so. Thanks, Bruce. So good news on the EPA grant front. If absent further questions, we'll move on then. Shadeland Avenue, we've talked a lot about, of course, 4423 Shadeland over the last couple of months. I placed at each of your spots just this afternoon a sort of hot off the presses letter from counsel for Edwards Electrical and Mechanical Service. I've been in contact with them. That's one of the groups that we put under an access agreement to be able to access the property and evaluate it in terms of construction needs, et cetera. I got this today from their legal counsel that's sort of a letter of interest or intent that spells out kind of what their proposed use would be, which, I've not honestly had a chance to review in great detail, but will do so and come back to this commission in July with some recommendations about if and how to move forward in considering this proposal and working toward maybe a project agreement that would spell out commitments on either side. We'll be evaluating the investment and employment numbers relative to, you'll see at the end, they've kind of softly requested some consideration relative to discounted purchase price and or tax abatement or other incentives. So we'll look at it from that angle, see what would be sort of a fair, reasonable, quantitative look at the project and whether it would be worth our while to incentivize. Obviously, it's a property that needs significant investment, and I think their proposal spells that out in some good detail about what they would plan to spend on the property. I would also point out that one of the things that got me excited was they have an approved training and certification module that they would house in the facility. So they would do some fleet maintenance there, but also it would be their sort of central facility for job training and certification for new employees and existing employees both, which I think would be impactful to have. Their headquarters is right down the street in Shadeland, across the border in Indianapolis, but they have a presence on the Shadeland corridor, a sizable operation. I think they point out 500 employees. So it could be a good partnership there and a good thing to host, but we'll evaluate this. And again, I'll come back in July. Any questions on the front end here, though?
Just one.
Sure.
Do they train just their employees at this facility, or do they train electricians?
I'll ask that. I'll ask that. Yeah. I think I did meet with them early on. The first time they went through the building, I was there. I took them through the building, and we talked some about one of the owners has instituted this same training module in Cincinnati, where I think they have a presence. So he's already, has a home there. They want to do an Indiana version. And I think it is related to helping them attract new employees. So I think they do provide some training for existing employees, but a lot of it is focused on, hey, we need workforce. So we're willing to offer the training and certification here so that you will then become an employee of Edwards. Because they need employees. So more that model than we're going to train you and spit you back out to other employers, but it's still kind of a net new employment attractor, which I think is an important consideration as I'm thinking through it.
What's the additional property that they're addressing? The certain additional adjacent ground not used for access to proposed residential. What are we talking about?
Yeah, and I wish I had a map handy. I think we've looked at one previously. If you'll recall, the 4423 property that's addressed as 4423 North Shadeland is, I believe, 2 parcels, but includes the entire building, but then cuts off right at the southern edge of the building. Then there's a property that the Redevelopment Commission also owns that's addressed as 4399 North Shadeland that is a kind of a sideways sort of L-shaped property that includes a portion of kind of a fenced asphalt lot that is right up against the 4423 building. And I think Edwards is interested in that lot, which would have to sort of subdivide from a portion of 4399, which controls kind of ingress egress to the Cato Trust family property, or Cato Family Trust property behind, which we've talked about as prospective development site, but we know that there are some infrastructure issues in the area. I think they're just expressing, and this came up when I was out there on the site with them, that they would like to control that fenced-in lot.
What's the value of that piece of property?
4399. I'd have to look. We've had it appraised. I don't recall off the top of my head. It is not a lot. It's all paved, but it's otherwise unimproved. So I want to say I recall a value of around 15,000, give or take. That's for the entire piece, and they really just want kind of the adjacent fenced-in lot is what they're interested in.
Cam, I would love to know when you're talking with them what the average salary is and what kind of benefits and stuff they offer their employees.
Could you,
Question?
that map you're referring to, could you bring that next time?
Yeah.
And then we can, yeah.
Yep.
And then as part of what you would present, your opinion on what we would do with the access portion of that, because the larger development is certainly of interest to us.
Right. Yeah, I think I expressed to them that we've always been jealous of that strip there because we know it could be important. Any kind of real potential development behind there really needs that piece to get in and out from Shadeland. Ferris is a smaller residential street, and I don't think that's really ideal, or even if it's even possible for ingress egress to a multifamily development off of Ferris. So really, we want to keep that, and I think they're fine with that strip that would go back there. They really are interested in a portion that would be cut off from there that would be the fenced-in lot. Right?
Great.
Pam, is this the only interested party in that?
No, good point. And no, it's not. It's the only proposal I've received so far. We do have an access agreement with Airco as well that I think we've talked about. It's a local asbestos remediation, mitigation and remediation firm that is looking at that as potential sort of expansion consolidation opportunity. They have been in the building, I think, as recently as last week, also getting some construction estimates and getting their heads around costs. I've been fully transparent with both that we have other interest and encouraged them both to work toward this kind of a document that would specify that they're interested and at what their investment might look like. So I will continue to follow up with Airco about theirs and hopefully have something to compare to this one and be able to make a recommendation to the commission moving forward as early as next meeting.
Good.
All right, thank you. Moving on then, Trades District, I think good news there. I've been in contact with legal counsel for GRSC about a couple of minimal comments that he'll be sending me in the next day or two. I think I would suggest we might table that resolution to July, but I would anticipate that we should be in a position to have comments ironed out. He was very clear with me when we spoke that there's not a lot that would be changed based on what we sent them, but we can sort those out and have approval then on the. We'll put that back on the agenda for July and have approval and execution pretty soonly thereafter. So they've gotten through their I think they're in a busy time in terms of work, but I know they had a big sort of business deal in May that they got through, and now they're looking to move forward. So it's good to have a contact with their counsel, and he said he's been tasked with getting things ironed out on the project agreement and getting it done. So I would anticipate that July will be the time where we'll know where everybody stands and have a pretty final document that you can all consider and approve. Yes, Jerry.
Could we have a fresh copy of the project agreement?
Yeah.
Prior to the meeting next month?
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah. And I'll keep you apprised as I get, I should have a red line from their council yet this week. And I can summarize that for you all, and then, as we get to what we might consider a final document, I'll make sure you all have it,
Great,
yes.
thank you.
I do also want to bring up, Bruce, you were maybe about to do this. If you've been by there in the last few days, you might have noticed some equipment.
I can only say that it's a good thing you brought this up.
Yep. No. I did respond to Bruce's question. It was a surprise to me. I will say that. I was unaware, but I did look into it. I've talked to the DPW and utilities is combined under one. I've talked to their superintendent. That equipment and gravel, et cetera, belongs to ENB Paving, large paving outfit, that is doing some work at 465 and 56th Street, just up the way. They inquired with our Department of Public Works about land that they had looked on GIS or otherwise and seen that the city controls, wondered if we might allow them to stage there, and they were told that that would be fine. And so they did so quickly. This all came up Friday, apparently, to my understanding. Again, I was unaware until I got the question and saw it right around the same time. And I now have contact information for somebody in a high up place at EMB Paving, and I will be talking to him tomorrow about their timeline and an access agreement, and that we have a project moving on. I've also expressed to Department of Public Works that I don't necessarily appreciate the approach. Just say yes. A reminder that we own that property, and we typically like to handle things in a contractual manner so that we're insured and indemnified and all that. So, Jerry.
The part that concerned me more was Reggie's reaction to it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And are they planning on manufacturing right there? Actually, they've got all the components.
The paving company
Yeah.
manufacturing asphalt as an asphalt plant? I don't think so. But again, they didn't talk to me.
That then gets into if they spill stuff.
Yeah, EPA stuff.
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at. So that's in my list of questions that I'll be asking Mike from EMB tomorrow. And again, another reason that we would want them to have a contractual agreement whereby they are agreeing to indemnify us against any such damage and add the Redevelopment Commission as a co-insured. All of that good stuff that we always do with access agreements. Plus, I want to be sure that they know that I think I heard just today in follow-up with the superintendent that their project is through November of 2019, which we can't give them that long. So I don't know that Freedy is aware or has seen it or would otherwise, as long as I can tell them that we can get them off and they can go with their work, they'll be fine. But I need the paving company to know that we will be bumping them.
Not to beat it a lot. Yeah, is it true? It is true that we have an access agreement with Freegee right now, don't we?
Do.
Yeah. I mean, it's signed. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're there.
I'm sorry?
Yet they're there with no such agreement.
Right. Yes.
And I think that there's some things that you included, and well done, I might add, that we probably ought to have just for our own protection.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, those are the things I meant. I was speaking of. Again, I think it's certainly best practice to have an agreement that requires contractual indemnity that runs from the user to the redevelopment commission, and a requirement that it add with some insurance minimum, like some minimum coverage requirements.
Now we're exposed, the city's exposed.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, we'll be doing that certainly. I would say we did with the company with Free GRC do an access agreement because they had thought they might need some overflow space for some temporary staging and prefabrication. They don't need it for that at this point. So the access agreement will be mostly for construction, evaluation, et cetera. So they did talk about putting a trailer and a sign on the site in the near future, which will be good. So I think we'll see some movement there, and I'll just make sure they know that they know, and the paving company knows that needs to shift elsewhere, and will be shifting elsewhere, and Freegee will be moving forward. So
Thank you.
Well, do you need to talk with Freegee so they know that it's there instead of somebody driving by and then them wondering what is going on?
Honestly, I don't think so, Bruce, but I'll make sure that I'm in contact with their COO and their legal counsel a lot in the last week or two, and will be in the next week or 3. So I will make sure that I mention it, but I don't think they're going to be too panicked. We're negotiating with them an agreement whereby we're actually going to transfer the real estate to them. So that's along with the right that then they would have to kick anybody off the property that they would want.
I mean, we're talking about doing the project agreement next meeting. This is kind of an overhang, obviously, so.
Indeed. So thank you for pointing that out, and we'll get that sorted right away. So
Thank you.
it was not anything that came through me.
Oh.
Or you would have heard about it first, because I would have asked you to approve an access agreement, like I did with everybody else. That
We're
was,
all surprised.
so we'll rectify that situation. Next, then, and again, I would anticipate that we will have a final or very close to final document to consider and hopefully approve in July. It's my understanding from talking to legal counsel, just in summary, that it's not going to look very much different than what we sent them that you've all seen already, but we'll make sure that we summarize changes and that you see them and are comfortable with them before we approve. Moving on then to the next item, which is I've referred to as Project Plum, which is kind of cute, but that I didn't come up with that. If you'll recall, in the packet that was emailed out, there was a document that speaks to a training grant program that Redevelopment, which is a branch of the Indy Chamber of Commerce, operates in conjunction, in partnership with the City of Indianapolis. This is something I think they've done a number of projects under in the last year or two. I wanted you to have the document to see that it's well thought out and administered in a pretty complete way. This is for projects that are Redevelopment serves kind of a LEDO or lead economic development organization function for the City of Indianapolis as a contractor to the city. They're kind of the front door for economic development projects a lot of times, including some that the city could attract by doing this kind of a training grant program. And really the city then approves sort of a TIF cash expenditure as a training grant through this program that gets administered by Redevelopment so that they can benchmark it and make sure that it's put into a program appropriately, et cetera. So I'd been aware of that program, but I got a call from a friend of mine, Domini at Redevelopment, who had a prospect under this training grant program that was looking at a site in Lawrence. It's a large trades company, which is good. So they were attracted to a particular piece of real estate in the city already, plus the fit on a qualitative level is good because we're looking for that. It's called Project Plum. Part of the reason that the city outsources its economic development functions is that the Indy Chamber is a not-for-profit, but it's not the government, so it is it can maintain confidentiality, which is important to companies looking to make moves like this. And they usually assign code names to prospects. This is their code name for this prospect, which I think in order to kind of preserve that, I'll just maintain as Prospect Plum. I think what I can tell you is it would be an impactful project. It is a very visible, recognizable company in the trades that has a number of companies under its umbrella: plumbing, mechanical, and HVAC. I think some other more commercial and industrial services. So good. It'd be a great project. They're interested in a property on 59th Street. So the question was from Develop Indy in the Indy Chamber, could we do the same partnership, the same program, and just have Lawrence fund it because it's a Lawrence property, which I thought was a great idea. So this would be, and they've already evaluated it. They do a whole quantitative analysis based on capital investment, job growth, retention, median wage, all that stuff. They've already run it and sent that over to me. So I wanted to broach the topic with you all. I've asked under new business, you'll see, for just consent to continue to pursue, and this was on the staff report just to get your thoughts and concerns about working in this way. I think what it would do, we would take that program document that I sent you and kind of reformulate it to say City of Lawrence where it says City of Indianapolis. This property would be just outside our current Pendleton Pike TIF boundaries, but state law allows for a certain percentage of cash on hand or TIF revenues to be utilized for training programs, and that has a more generalized benefit that I think would meet the test, or you can use TIF proceeds to serve or benefit the geographic area, given that this is just kind of around the corner from the trades district and would have a training component, have a large employment component. I think that probably fits. And if we were to move forward and actually, I would put a resolution in front of you to actually authorize the grant that would have some findings in it. But I wanted to be clear that I know that the property they're looking at is not actually in the boundaries. I'm moving forward under the basis that I think it meets the test to be able to utilize cash that we currently have to make this training grant. That would be the incentive to bring this company from Hamilton County, which would be great. What else did I want to say about it? The Develop ND rubric and their matrix quantitative scoring has recommended an award of $50,000 to $75,000. So this would be a grant from Pendleton Pike TIF of, that'll be a negotiated point, but around that for again, I think this company has well over 300 employees and is visible and sizable. I think would make a big impact in the local economy here. So I think it's worth pursuing, potentially through a reconfigured partnership with Development where they'd handle all the administration. I think there's some good stuff in their program relative to how they follow up with how those dollars are deployed by the company. And for a organization this size and this potentially impactful, I think that's a pretty good buy, honestly, is my impression. But really all I'm asking for later in new business is just kind of your consent to proceed to try to work things out and come back to you, again, hopefully as early as next meeting with a more specific resolution that says, yes, this amount for these reasons, and here's how it will roll out.
Are we talking like Pendleton Pike closer to 465 or closer to like Sunnyside?
Closer to Sunnyside.
Okay.
Yep. The property they're looking at is a large existing building on 59th Street.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think I can say that without irritating anyone too much.
Now that we know it, yeah.
Don't want too many specifics or get you
We
in
got
trouble.
it now.
Got it.
Just, so, as far as the RDC is concerned, the only thing that we need to be concerned with now from a monetary standpoint, since we haven't seen the proposal, we're not talking about making any commitment at this point for the TIF, et cetera, is your engagement in this investigation.
Right.
Correct?
You mean in terms of services, right?
Yeah. So, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If anything, and I would say to that end, reaching back to the original sort of additional matters engagement.
Yes.
I have one related to the Trades District and Shadeland Avenue at a not-to-exceed value of $30,000 at an hourly rate of $250 an hour. We're about halfway on that.
Yeah.
I checked just a couple of weeks ago. And I think we could do one of two things. One, I could submit a new one that would be specific to this project. Two, I could consider it part of Trades District project under that additional engagement. And the idea being, if we were to get to that not to exceed, I'd just come back and ask for here, we'd have a sense of what we might need to get those closed out and just say, how about you just reauthorize that?
So if you could kind of define those two options for the president so that we can, if you will, authorize that.
I'll do that. I think probably broad as it is long, apart from if you wanted to track that as a separate project. Cost-wise, it's going to be the same.
What I'm trying to get to is what's best for the RDC in addressing this. I don't think we're to that point yet.
Right.
So help us with that.
All right, I'll do that, yes. Point, thank you. But yes, beyond that, I'm not, it would be a future, I was excited about the potential project, and it will be a future resolution that will be a lot more specific, as we, I will meet with the president of the company here in the coming couple of weeks here. I'll be able to go back to Develop Indy and say, if you consent to moving forward, I'll be able to say, yeah, I think we're interested in doing this. Let's reformulate the program documents to have City of Lawrence on there, and I'll come back to you all with an actual resolution that says, we want to do this project at this amount for these reasons. Yeah.
Got it.
So, exciting. I think it's an exciting project, where I wouldn't have been itching to bring it to you. So moving on from that, we've talked some about legal counsel of the Redevelopment Commission. After David Johnson's departure, city has a new city attorney. This is not under her scope. I wanted to bring up just for discussion that I think I could serve in that role and continue to steer projects and be staff, while also I've been drafting your resolutions, actually, going back quite a while.
Wow.
And so I wonder if we might just sort of reconfigure the engagement to have an actual attorney-client relationship between the Redevelopment Commission and me that would also be sort of staff services. Get your thoughts on that. I think the engagement would otherwise be really the same, but I would present it nonetheless so that you would see it. This is just really a discussion item. I've talked to the mayor about this. He knows that this is what I do for some other communities, and so I'm capable of doing that if the commission would have me as its counsel. I think the shift would be pretty invisible, honestly, but it would have that attorney-client relationship, which is, I think, important relative to the activities of the commission, so that it has a go-to legal counsel. Jerry.
I always have a question, sorry. The way the RDC is constituted, okay, do we need a representative from city legal, okay, to approve some of the things that we do?
No.
We do not. So you could serve without, okay, thank you.
Does that change your monthly fees towards us? Do we have to look at our budget or anything like that?
I don't think it would. No.
Okay.
No.
Doing it already, so.
I am, and so, but I'm doing it in a way that's sort of outside with the engagement, which I think predates your service on the commission. It did lay out some specific areas of work, essentially, and the drafting resolutions and sending the letter I sent to the overlapping units a couple weeks ago is not really on there. I've been doing them. It would just probably be good to have it more of a legal services engagement, but I don't anticipate changing sort of the flat fee per year,
Okay.
additional matter kind of an arrangement.
that's a good point. You just add those additional, things like contract review.
Right, yes, yes.
Pam, and is there another, not that I'm saying I want another option, but is there another option if the commission were to say, no, we don't want to do that? What would be the next step?
Yeah, that's entirely up to you all. There are others out there that do represent redevelopment commissions. You could, the legal services piece is a professional service, so you can handle that in any number of ways. It's not something that state law requires a public request for proposals on, but you could do that. There's no reason you can't. There's also no reason you couldn't more informally shop for somebody else that would fill that seat. This sounds self-serving, but I would say that would be an additional expense. So it would be a consideration if you were to do that, either going onto the street with it or formally or informally. You're asking for a proposal that would be additional to my services unless you wanted to put them both out. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I really just wanted to bring that up for discussion and see if there are any concerns, questions about that before I kind of reconfigure a legal services proposal and send to you all to consider. That would be kind of encapsulate what I'm really already doing, and you can consider it then and maybe
In the
approve it.
meanwhile, you'll continue doing what you're already doing.
Yes,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any conflicts of interest that jump out in your mind on that, serving in both capacities?
No, there are not. It's really, it's the commission that acts, and I really only do already what it authorizes me to do. And again, having kind of played that role, there's not really a scenario that I can foresee. This is again why I want to bring it up. So if you are foreseeing any way that it would be a conflict, let me know and we can talk about that. But from a technical standpoint, no, it would be representation of the commission, but everything that you do has to be approved by you all. And so I think the only way that it gets into a conflict is if I'm in a position where I can obligate you all to something that would benefit me and not you. And I don't see a way for that to happen in any real sense. But please let me know if you disagree or have questions or issues with that.
Just lose it.
Well, but then, it's kind of off the cuff. The other thing would be that if the president of the RDC needs counsel on a matter before it's even addressed at a meeting. I mean, he would have the obligation. He would have somebody he could call. He would have not he, but you would have an obligation to provide that kind of relationship, which he would need in order to determine course of action. Without it, yeah. And that's what I was looking for.
Okay.
And you're saying that there's no issue with that at all?
Right. I don't see an issue with that. If it were something that any one of you came to me with specifically that would be at odds with the commission, I think I would have to decline that. I'd struggle with what that scenario would be. But to the extent that I mean, if that were to ever come up where we have some kind of conflict internal to the commission, I guess similar to if you're representing somebody who's entering a real estate development partnership, you can't really negotiate their partnership agreement representing them and representing the real estate partnership. I mean, similar kind of thing here. I don't know that I could represent one of you against the rest of you. But I don't think state law provides much opportunity for one of you to do anything on your own. Unless you're unless and until the commission authorizes one of you to act on its behalf.
Unless we're off the reservation.
So that, again, that discussion point, without further questions, we can move on to do business if you're ready.
Great.
Good, okay, so making this seamless. Just by way of brief introduction, state legislature passed a new law this past session, I believe, not 2018, I think think more recently, that requires redevelopment commissions in the state of Indiana to invite overlapping taxing units to a meeting of the commission prior to June 30th of the calendar year to present about the redevelopment commission's tax increment financing districts and sort of the details thereof and the projects and priorities, and have a general overview of tax increment financing. We've done that. Our overlapping taxing units, and Chris Barnett and I were talking about this a little bit. We're talking specifically about property tax. So things like school corporation and library and township trustee and Marion County and the sheriff, the airport authority, actually. So we have a list. We have a distribution list. We did send them all a letter and or an email. Thank you to Mary Jo for helping with that. They were all received an invitation. They can also ask that I attend on the commission's behalf, or a member of the commission itself attend a meeting of theirs to present about the, so, and they may, and I'll have to do that. But our friends at AIM, formerly IACT, the Indiana Association of Cities and Towns, so the municipal kind of interest group, provided a nice, succinct video about the basics of TIF that we can play to the extent that anybody is, I don't know that I see a apart from Mr. Frigi here, a representative of any of our overlapping units in the audience, but nonetheless, to have done the presentation, we'll watch this educational little video, and I'll run down sort of our allocation areas that's on the handout that you'll have in your packet. So, Mary Jo?
Providing an incentive to stimulate development that would not otherwise occur is why Indiana has tax increment financing. TIF districts are formed by redevelopment commissions, hoping to generate private investment, thus improving an area's employment, infrastructure, environment, and more. While many TIF districts concentrate on revitalization of existing structures, investment in greenfield or undeveloped properties also occurs. The area's assessed value at the time a TIF district is created is the base AV. This ensures that all taxes collected on the base AV continue to be passed to the overlapping taxing units inside the TIF district. The incremental AV, which is anything above the base, is multiplied by the district's tax rate to determine TIF revenue for the area. TIF revenues are spent on a wide array of critical projects, including bricks and mortar infrastructure projects, both above and below ground, as well as game-changing facade improvements. Clean, safe streets, and recreational amenities speak volumes about a community's viability. Therefore, TIF is used to provide enhancements that will draw talent and the businesses that follow. TIF is a powerful tool for Hoosier cities, towns, and counties. With this tool comes a significant amount of transparency and oversight. All formal actions occur during a combination of public meetings and public hearings. Online reports are generated and submitted to state agencies, overlapping units, and posted online for all to see. All redevelopment commissions are required to have a non-voting member from the appropriate school district. All redevelopment commissions are required to hold in-person meetings with all impacted taxing units. To sum it up, TIF is a vital, effective, transparent economic development tool for local governments, used to promote investment that would not otherwise occur. To learn more about how Indiana communities are using TIF as a quality of place driver, visit aimindiana.org/TIF.
Short, sweet, concise.
Yeah, it is.
And Cam's gone.
You scared him away, Bruce. Too many questions today.
Any thoughts or discussions on the video?
No, well done.
Very good.
It was good.
Fancy.
Anybody learn anything? It's all review. Okay, great. Great. So with that general information out there about what TIF is, I did prepare just a brief summary about the allocation areas we have in Lawrence that this commission it controls. What we do with them, we have two that are project-specific, Monarch and Meyer Plastics. Of course, Meyer Plastics being recent as of last year, whereby the commission has essentially pledged all the incremental tax revenue generated by that project to debt service for the bonds. And part of this is heading toward a resolution that you'll see in new business. We have to determine each year whether or not the commission wishes to pass through incremental assessed valuation in any of its tax increment financing allocation areas, which is only if you had a TIF where you were generating revenue of more than 200% what you need to pay debt service on existing obligations and do projects that are eligible, you would then have to really kind of make the determination or the finding that you do not want to pass through. You still wouldn't have to, but you would have to at least consider it. Here, I think, as this illustrates for the Pendleton Pike allocation area, we don't have 200%, on an annual basis of the revenue that we need to do all the projects that we want to do. And that's really what the resolution says, but just to run through that, our annual revenues in the Pendleton Pike allocation area are around $400,000 a year. We do have existing bond obligations from 2012. The debt service is $145,000 a year, I believe. There's also a debt service reserve, but that was funded out of proceeds. So that's this is really just a 406 redevelopment capital account. Professional services, which is me, last year was $67,000 a year. That's 70 was kind of the ballpark. We've talked about the free GRSC project that includes contribution of land, but also an agreement to reimburse certain actual infrastructure costs at an amount not to exceed $300,000. So between that and the debt service, we're already past the $400,000 that we expect to collect this year and would tap kind of reserves that we have going back several years. Project Plum we've talked about. I penciled in $100,000 on this report just as a round figure. We think that we may be able to incentivize this company to locate here for closer to 75 or even 50,000 in a training grant, but just to have not put too hard a ceiling on it. And then we've talked about, it's been a little while, we've talked about Record Street and the need for that positive infrastructure piece in the center of the trades district, the heart of the trades district. It's currently interrupted awkwardly, kind of right at Bragdon. The Redevelopment Commission owns the small piece of real estate that we need to connect it, but to do that and enhance the road and make it really the central corridor, we have an initial engineer's estimate of $3.5 million just for construction, and probably another $500,000 in engineering and design. So we can't even do that project at this point. I don't think the TIF would even sustain borrowing $3.5 million in a bond to be able to float the debt service. So we're not in a scenario, unfortunately, where we have more than 200% of what we need of the Pendleton Pike TIF and have to consider passing through incremental assessed valuation. I would say too, just to complete the understanding, if we were to do so, that really just means we're not passing through revenue directly. We're just passing through a certain amount of valuation that would then be taxed by the rate and divided up across all of those overlapping units. So the effect is pretty incremental to even a large unit like the school district. If we were to say, we'll pass through $100,000 a year in assessed valuation, that would be sliced up, and the piece of the pie that would go times the 2.78 or 2.8 tax rate to each unit would be minuscule. So we certainly don't have the room in our TIF to pass through revenue and do anybody much good. We hope to continue to boost employment and economic activity The schools have been very supportive of the projects that we've done, including Meyer Plastics, which was a new allocation area because they realized that that benefits the whole in accordance with what you saw in the video. And so we've historically been well aligned with the interests of our school district and not had pushback like you've seen in some other communities, because I think they realize that we're not really taking a bunch of revenue that hurts them, and we're not incentivizing a bunch of residential projects that add a lot of new students while siphoning off property tax revenue that might otherwise help with transportation, et cetera. So I think that's how I would summarize kind of 3 allocation areas we have and kind of how they go, and sets up the next item, which is the resolution that essentially says we're not going to pass through incremental assessed value because we want that revenue to do these projects that we've been considering for some time. Any questions about that, how that all works?
I just have a quick clarification question. Geez, oh, Pete's. For Meyer Plastics and Monarch, since they're basically using the TIF reallocation to pay off their debts, when they pay off their construction debts, does the money start coming back to us?
It goes to all the units.
It goes to all well, yeah, okay.
I say that, let me back that up a little bit. Monarch predates me, and it's been a little while since I looked at it, but I know with Meyer, we set it up so if they overperform, like if their TIF throws off more revenue than we anticipated, we use that to pay down the bond early, and we could redeem it, or we could retire it early, essentially. At which point, the RDC would have a small window to capture all of the increment if it chose to do so. In that instance, we would be in the realm of needing to make a determination that that we need all of it, or we're gonna pass through incremental AV. We're certainly not there yet. I would also say that sunsets will come into play. So the other thing the state legislature has been doing in the last sort of 5-10 years is adding sunsets to existing allocation areas, and especially new ones, having now issued an obligation that those bonds for Meyer Plastics. We only have 25 years before that TIF goes away altogether, at which point all of the revenue gets distributed to the units in accordance with the tax formula. And I think those bonds are amortized over 23 years currently. Okay. There's a 2-year construction phase, and so if we paid them off a year early, we might have a year or 2 where we could collect all of the revenue. That's 22 years away.
Okay.
Yeah. Monarch is a little closer to rolling off. It is a good question. Monarch, I think, is a 2011 deal. So the other thing about Monarch is it was layered in with a business personal property tax abatement. So our debt service, our revenues are not level because that burns off a little bit each year. Mm-hmm. By 2021, I think we'll be collecting all of the business personal property tax revenue and real estate tax revenue. But the debt service on those bonds is not level. So compared to Meyer, where we know what the payment is every year, the Monarch bonds do this over time and are timed to the abatement rolling off so we can make them, but it is not like a simple calculation over the life of the bond. You have to really look year by year what your debt service payment is that year, what your anticipated collection is that year. So I'm not sure that those will be paid off early. We're kind of halfway through.
I just want to make sure
quite
that
halfway
they're
through.
not making money off of tax dollars that should actually be reinvested because they're getting closer to paying off their debts and stuff.
Say that again.
I was just making sure that they're not like, if we've got their, however long it takes, they're not holding on to money that they shouldn't, where they should be paying down their debt, so they're not making money off the TIF district, money that would be reinvested in.
Yeah, and they have to, in both cases, pay what they're assessed to pay, absent the abatement on Monarch. So they have to pay that. What we've done is simply say the new real estate tax revenue in Meyer's case, and I think business personal property. So the new property tax revenue created there that we would otherwise collect, we're pledging to pay those.
Yeah.
So they're still paying their taxes. We've essentially loaned them an upfront sum of their real estate taxes over 20 years,
Okay, cool.
basically.
Yeah, this is,
Like a 20-year abatement, almost, because now they're, instead of not paying their taxes, they are paying them, but they're going to repay capital that they got up front to build the project.
perfect.
So I think that concludes our tax increment financing presentation for our overlapping units, and I'll keep you posted. If anybody invites me to come present to their meeting, I will do so. Because I have to now, under state law. That, I think, brings us to the resolution, which is simple. This is similar to what we've passed in the last couple of years. It coincides with a notice letter that we send to the overlapping units. It says we're not going to pass through incremental assessed value because we have use for it, all. So that's what the resolution states. If any questions about that, I'll take those. Otherwise, I think that's pretty standard.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 3, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
It was easy.
All right, thank you. And then the last new business item, of course, is related to the staff update there, Project Plum being the potential partnership with Development. I think it does me some good to just have you all vote to consent to moving forward to explore this as a potential project, knowing that before we were to do any kind of award or proceed in a formal fashion, I'll have a resolution in front of you with some more specific information.
Cam, question, is there a timeline on that?
No, I've asked through, and they have I think the company has a consultant, like a economic development consultant. So I've asked via Development what their sort of real estate timeline looks like. I don't know if they have the property in Lawrence under contract yet or just looking to do so. But I think it's still fairly early. It's not a tomorrow thing. I think we've got time to come back in July and say yes after I have a little bit of this all came up really just kind of last week or the week before. So very much kind of between meetings, and it will help me to have your consent that this is something we want to explore. And I think if I were able to go back to them and say, the commission is willing to kind of move forward in negotiating this, and then we'll consider it at its next meeting for approval, that'll be sufficiently fast.
Do I have a motion?
Do you want a motion, Cam?
Motion for consent.
Yeah,
Motion
you
for-
just move to consent to allow me to further
And I
explore it.
move to have the RDC consent to pursue the Project Plum and training grant.
And second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We did keep old business on there, which is resolution number 1, approving the Freegee project agreement. Again, I think in accordance with my staff update, I would ask that you table it one more time.
Yeah, we tabled it.
You want that in motion form too, or?
Yeah, I think we've been doing that, just move to table it until the next meeting. And
Mr. President, I'll move to table Resolution 1-219, 2019,
Do I
the
have,
next meeting.
do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any other business come before the commission?
I'd like to just reiterate one. I was hoping to get a question answered on the interest on all of our accounts at some point.
yeah, that's right. You have asked that question. I've not heard from the controller on that. I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if I mentioned this before. He's a reformed investment banker, so it's something I know he watches very closely and cares a lot about. So I know he's on top of it, but I don't know what the specific sort of rates we're getting, et cetera, are.
Any other business?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to congratulate Dick and the Lawrence School Board and the school system for the accomplishments that they've achieved in the last year. I don't know how many people saw the mailer that was put out, but that was impressive. Teacher of the Year, Tech Teacher of the Year, a number of student awards, really great work. And as a community, we thank you for that.
Thanks, Bruce.
I agree.
Thanks for pointing that out. I haven't seen the mailer, but been good. Well, especially given the mayor's background, we've always held the schools here in high regard, and it's been an intentional part of even how we handle our tax increment financing districts, like we just talked about. We don't want to add burden to the schools while taking away resources. We want to just take a more holistic approach to the community. Help. Turner.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
You may, I offer a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.